For our records. All right. Hello, hello. Oh my goodness. It's been what, a year and a half since we've had a live conversation.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So uh in this year and a half, Jerome and I have had many conversations that we realized we should just be recording and be on live or have a podcast or something. So we wanted to come back and have a conversation. Back in November, I had the opportunity to go down to Palm Springs and present at Brothers of the Desert. Jerome just got back from the Dodi retreat in Atlanta and had an opportunity to present there. And so I wanted part of the conversation to be around reparenting. And I'm going to have you explain a little bit about what that is for you. But also, I wanted to talk about it in the context of the negative impact of not feeling wanted as a Black gay man or as a Black same gender loving person, and the process of having to reparent that. Because I think on your side, you really talk about it from the consciousness and the energy perspective. And then on my side, I'm really looking at the physiological and somatic impact of that, and then also kind of the strategy for moving forward. So I'm interested to see how these two conversations come together.
Yay! I didn't know we was going. I didn't know you was going to get me. You got me because I didn't think we was going to go. I was not prepared to talk about the reparenting piece, but I can go. But just to let you know, you got me today. Yeah. So let's go into the reparenting piece of this. So what reparenting is it is the process and the practice, because to me it's a practice, and it might be a lifelong practice. And it's an aspect of loving ourselves to me. So I teach self-love. I believe self-love is the key to healing and to manifestation. And the more we love ourselves, the better we're able to manifest what we really want in a life that feels delicious to us. And the more we're able to be healthy and whole and well. And one of the aspects of loving ourselves, one of the practices of loving ourselves is reparenting ourselves. And what reparenting is this idea of learning how to effectively give ourselves the love we needed as children that we did not receive as adults. So as kids, there's certain ways we needed to be loved. This is something that, again, that gets kind of taken out of our education and childhood development, in our schooling, in our churches, etc. But as human beings, as spiritual beings having human experiences, we actually need to be loved. Love is a need. It's not some theological or philosophical aspect. It's literally a need. And like a food is a need, and water is a need, and air is a need. Those things we need to ingest, we need to receive in order to be healthy and in order to function. Love is also a need. It is a need just like that. And there are different facets of love. Like love is a multifaceted, meaning it has many aspects to it. It's not just one thing. But there are many facets of love that we need to receive as children in order for us to develop a healthy sense of self, in order for us to experience and operate from a sense of wholeness, and to be resilient. So if things arise in our life that challenge our sense of self or challenge our wholeness, when we have been loved fully and we've received love fully as kids, we have a strong sense of self we have a sense of resiliency. So those things don't negatively demolish us, right? They don't destroy us. But when we haven't been loved, those things in any way, right? Whether it was intentional or by accident or whatever, we don't have a strong sense of self. We don't operate out of a sense of wholeness, and we don't have a strong sense of resiliency. So we begin to be destroyed by external circumstances and demolished by them in ways. Our health gets demolished and destroyed. Our sense of peace gets demolished. Our sense of self and fulfillment and joy in the world. And so reparenting is this practice that came up really through therapy, through psychotherapy, but many healers like myself teach this type of thing as well. But reparenting is this practice of looking at where we did not receive the love that we needed as kids and how that affected us. And how can we go about as adults making sure that we receive that love, that we not only give ourselves that love, but that we build lives that allow us to receive it from our lives and from the people in our lives, so that we have a strong sense of self now, so that we operate from a sense of wholeness now, and that we have resiliency now. Like, just because you didn't receive it in childhood doesn't mean you will never receive it ever. Reparenting is the process which by you receive it. And one last thing about that is it is not a process of fault finding. It is a process of kind of discovery and learning. So you're not looking at like wagging your finger at your parents and shaming them and damning them and saying you should have, because a lot of times we were raised with parents that just didn't know how to do it. They loved us, but they didn't know how to love us, right? And so because they weren't taught and they probably didn't receive the love they needed. But so it's not a fault finding. You're not going in here to start to place blame on people, but you're going from a place of discovery and education to really understand, oh, this is how I needed to be nourished. And this is how I needed to be fed. And this is what I needed to be healthy and whole. And, oh, I didn't get that. And this explains why I am how I am now, what's going on with me now. And if I want to heal and I want a more delicious life experience, this is what I need now. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what reparenting is about.
Well, I love that because there's so many pieces, and I'm glad you brought in the last piece around not fault finding, because I literally had this conversation with my dad on Christmas Day.
Okay,
And so
take me through
there was this period, and I think this is true for most same gender loving people, but particularly same gender loving Black men, of having this period of time where you either physically remove yourself from the family, or you're disowned from the family, or you divorce them in some form or fashion. And all of my family's in Alabama. Now I'm here in California. I've been here for 17 years. And so this, in some ways, this feels like home because it's safe for me, or it feels safe for me. Whereas Alabama was just kind of like the place where I grew up. So now when I think about like that period of time of being away from my family, there was a lot of learning that happened during that time. And there was a lot of kind of self-discovery that needed to happen, where I needed to be out of the context of my normal family unit in order to figure out what that was. But in that process, I realized part of my going away was because I was angry. It was like, all right, how can I get away and not have to deal with that, and feel like I can put some parameters around my interactions with my family. So in that process, there was a lot of pain that came with that, because you need your family and you want to be around them. So fast forward to like a week or two before Christmas, I had just finished my therapy session. It was the last therapy session of the year. And I sent my therapist a message and said, forgiveness work is hard work. And right now I'm not wanting to forgive. And can I let that be okay? And I was sitting in like, okay, well, what happens if, something happens to my family while I'm on this binge of not wanting to talk to my family and having to work through all of that? But the other part of it was I needed to honor that for myself. I was really angry. And I was angry because my parents didn't know what they needed in order to take care of me. And I was mad that they didn't intuitively know how to take care of me. And so I kept getting text messages from my family, and they would either be short or I would just ignore them, or they would call and I would ignore the phone calls. And so finally, my sister, I think on Christmas Eve, she sent John a text message and was like, "Look, I don't know, I'm not sure what's going on, but I need you to tell him to call me." So I called her and we talked for a little bit. And I was like, I need you to know I'm okay, but I just need some space. And she's like, "Well, you know, your mom and dad, they're looking for you and they just want to know you're okay and blah, blah, blah." And I said, yeah, I'll call them. So on Christmas Day, I called and I could feel myself like preparing for battle as I was going into this conversation with my dad. And so I decided to go for my morning walk. And as I was talking to him, I could just feel my blood pressure starting to go up, and I could feel myself getting ready to go off. And part of the conversation was around um, not feeling like I had a choice in where I went to school. As you know, I went to a predominantly white school, which was a school that wasn't my first choice, because that wasn't where my friends went. And so for me, it was this being put into this environment where I felt like I couldn't be myself.
Mm.
And so then that on top of like wanting to do well in school, because the messages you get in the Black community is like, you represent all of us. So don't go in here acting a fool and thinking like it's going to be okay, because if anybody gets called out, it's going to be you. And then the third piece was being same gender loving and not wanting people to see that and trying to protect and hide that as I moved through the school. So I ended up embracing in my physiology, I ended up embracing in my self-expression and all of the things. And so when we were in the conversation, I was trying to explain all of that to him. And then at one point he said, "Do you think it would have been easier if you just told us sooner?" And I'm walking down the street and literally yelling at him as I'm going through this, because I'm like, that is probably one of the dumbest questions you could possibly ask me. And I can't believe you asked me that. And and at the same time, it was the reason why I wasn't ready to talk to them yet. Because I knew that all of that heat and agitation and anger was just brewing under the surface. And I didn't want it to go at them, because I was angry at them, but I was more so angry at the situation of like, I just wanted to feel safe.
Mm.
And I didn't have the ability to communicate wanting to feel safe. And also they didn't have the attunement to see that that's what I was looking for. And so it was like this you think about Craigslist, it was the misconnection. Where you're like, oh, God, how do you find forgiveness in that and also find a way to move forward while at the same time honoring the pain? And I think that's where the reparenting piece and the practice is really important, because there there is this level of forgiveness that has to happen,
Mhm.
but there's also this level of self-honoring of like, you can hold both, and neither of them have to be wrong, but you also have to find out how you're going to move forward. So what does the relationship look like now? Uh,
Okay, so you just gave me 1,000 things. So, so, but I want to. You've. It was so beautiful because you have really touched on some things. So I want to touch on some things. I
mhm,
can't touch on everything because you literally just gave me 1,000 things. So as we're talking about in the frame of reparenting, and since you brought in this forgiveness thing, I have to speak to this. So the piece about forgiveness, that why it's so hard for so many of us, because it's not taught well really in the West. It's not taught well, and so you don't really know what it actually is. So the first thing first, forgiveness is for you, because forgiveness is to bring you back into the natural energy of your soul, which is one of the aspects of that is peace. And when we are not forgiving someone, we're not at peace, and not being in the energy of your soul is not benign. So this is why I say, like, forgive everyone for everything, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve the well-being that comes from that. And that you cannot hold resentment in the body for long and before it starts to manifest some type of illness or disease. So that's why, like, I am all for forgiveness at all times, but there is processes. This is why I say, like, we're not taught it well in the West, because what we're taught is like, oh, child, just forgive them and go into positivity. And that's not how it's gonna go. The first thing, and this is where it ties into reparenting, because part of the thing that we needed for love as kids is to be fully accepted for who we are as we are in any moment. And so one of the things that how that looks like is, were you allowed to be angry? Were you allowed to be frustrated? Were you allowed to have any emotions that weren't positive? Right? Was that accepted? And were you seen in that? And were you held in that as a kid? And if you weren't, then what ends up happening as an adult is you try to skirt over those emotions, because what the biggest thing that we want is to be loved. And so if you think being angry, there's a subconscious belief that being angry some type of way won't make me receive love. So I need to run away from this, or I need to suppress it. Reparenting yourself in this process looks like, my anger is worthy as well, and it's a part of me, and I need to express it. So again, any expression of myself belongs and is worthy. So that's probably part of how reparenting comes into forgiveness. But this is the part of the forgiveness part that a lot of people we're not taught. Is the first part of forgiveness is you have to express your anger. You have to express all of it. Like, you have to get it out. It has to be said, because your anger is information as a soul. It's usually information. It's about something that's very valuable to you, something that's really important to you. And it's trying to inform you about something, about how you need to shape your life so that something about you is honored. And so a lot of times what I have people do, and this is what I do in my own forgiveness practice, is I say exactly what I need to say. And I may not be able to say it to you, but I'll write it. I'll write it and I'll sit down and I will write it exactly. I don't try to be cute. I don't try to be grammar. I don't try to be polite. I will say exactly what it is. Sometimes it sounds like, this really hurt me. Like, and what I mean by what I say, I need to say exactly how this made me feel. I need to say exactly why this is inappropriate for me, why this is not okay. And I need to say what I wanted instead. And so I will write all of this out. I will write it exactly out. And sometimes it may sound, depending on the situation, it may sound like, this didn't make me feel good when you said this. This hurt me, da 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 da. Sometimes, depending on the situation and where I am, it may sound like, you got me fucked up when you said this, right? And so it depends on where I am, but I need to say what it is that I want to say. That is reparenting myself. That is allowing myself to be in fullness. Now, I might not need to say it to you, because I might not want to have some type of directly to you. I might not want to be in conflict with you in that way. But I need to have this said. This needs to live somewhere else instead of inside of my body, inside of my energy field. So I will say it to you in a letter. I might write it. I might not even send it to you. It depends on what I feel after I get it out. Because a lot of times what happens is, once you transfer that energy, it leaves. And so you feel, oh, I'm complete and I can just burn the letter. But I need to get my anger. I need to express it. Because here's another thing you find out. When you express the anger, when you allow it to express itself, not only do you free yourself up to feel the next thing, for it to release and no longer be stuck in you, but you receive its message. This is the thing, again, we're not taught about forgiveness, is when you express your anger, when you express it. See, this is another thing. When you express your anger in the beginning, it doesn't get to resentment and it doesn't get to violence and rage. That rage and resentment and violence comes from suppressed anger, like anger that's been building and not being said. But when you express your anger, at the end of it, this is what I always find for me, is it informs me. And it's like, oh, yeah, this is important to me. And oh, you know what? I can see how I'm actually grateful for them, because now because that situation helped me see how I need to change this aspect of my life. And I would have never done that had this not come to me. And also I can have compassion for this person. Oh, I see you really maybe not didn't mean it this way, or you didn't have any tools to do anything else. But until I honor myself and I allow myself to exist in how I feel, I can't get the wisdom from my emotions. And so that's the first step. And then I can get, once I express, then I get the wisdom. Then once the wisdom comes, then the feeling of, oh, I can see how you, oh, okay, I can see what you were going through. I can see what this is. And then I can really be at peace, and I can forgive you. And I'm no longer at war with you in my mind. But that doesn't come until I'm fully expressed how this made me feel and what I need instead. And that's part, and again, that's part of the reparenting. This is how reparenting shows up in many different things, because we're not taught it shows up in our spirituality, right? Because how we're being taught it is just, you shouldn't hold anger, that's not a spiritual thing, or um just forgive everyone and be at peace all the time. Absolutely, by the way, I fully agree with forgiving everybody and being at peace, but there's a process, and that does not happen. You don't get to that at first. You need to walk yourself through all of that. And it may take you a day, it may take you two, it may take you a month, but you have to get out. And this is something we're not, again, the reparenting process, especially as Black men, we're not taught to sit in our anger and express it. And and again, I get why we're not, because our parents' generation and their parents' generation, for Black men to be angry and to be expressing it was going to be a death sentence for them, right? Mm-hmm. Growing up in a country that looked at Black anger as affront and offense, and how dare you, and that we were less than in other people's eyes. So if you expressed your anger, you're going to get killed. You're going to get taken off the set some type of way. So that manifested in our parents really not being able to hold anger for Black kids, for Black male children especially. So we're not taught how to, Black males in America especially, are not taught how to express healthily the anger. We're taught to suppress it and be nice and be sweet and all of that, so that you don't ruffle people's feathers, so that you don't get killed. But what that happens for you is you suppress, and it turns into resentment, it turns into rage, and then it turns into violence, because it has to come out. But when you keep suppressing it, it comes out in rage and in violence. But when you first express your anger, it's done, and you get the message from it and you move on. And this is where forgiveness comes in. This is where it's really about, but that's the piece about forgiveness that we're not taught, is expression is the first piece of it. And it's the core, it's the foundational piece. It's the expression of what you are upset about, why you are upset, why this is not okay, and what you need instead. And when you get that piece, then the compassion for the other person, the understanding for the other person, the wisdom about what this really is for you and how you need to be in your life comes. And then you can come into the decision about whether you want to interact with that person again or not. But that doesn't come until you reparent yourself, as a Black person, especially, by allowing yourself to feel the anger that you feel.
As you were talking about that, I realized my reparenting process is two kind of distinct pieces. There's the communication piece, and then there's the physical piece. So what I've noticed for myself is I've held on to a lot of anger and rage in my body. And so in order for me to begin moving that out, that was a big reason why I started doing the somatic work and really understanding how to work with my body, is because I didn't feel safe with the power that was behind anger and rage. It just felt like this tsunami of emotion, and I was just about to get taken out. And I think as one of the things you mentioned is not not having the safe space or the know-how around communicating it. But then there's also like this having the safe space and the know-how for working with it as you move it out of your system. And I remember I'm able to do it now because now it's just a part of my practice. But one of the things I don't ever really remember my parents saying to me, like when I wanted to have a fit or had big emotions, it was always like, don't act up. But it was never like, oh, I see you're really into your stuff right now. Let me be with you as you're in your stuff right now.
You
And
better
then
get it together before I give you something to be angry about. Right.
wait, get out in the car now because when you go in this store, ah.
Right. All of that, right? And it gets suppression, suppression, suppression.
Yeah. So there's this there's the verbal practice of expressing the anger for the sake of forgiveness, and then there's learning how to work with the actual physical sensation and the power behind it. And you need to have both, because without it, you're still going to be holding on to tension. And then people wonder, like, oh, why are there high incidences of high blood pressure or chronic stress or some other kind of chronic illness? And it's because we still haven't worked with our body to get it out. We've gone through the mental gymnastics of it, but it's still stuck in our fashion, bones and joints and physiology, and passed through our DNA from our ancestors and parents and grandparents. And so really learning how to reparent yourself, I think, is um, it has this multi-layered kind of approach to it. And if we don't learn how to do it incrementally, it can feel overwhelming to people to where it shut down even more, right? Because you're just like, ooh, if I
Well,
open
that's
this up, go
it's
ahead.
you I didn't want to interrupt, but it's a really important piece because again, one of the one of the ways we need to be loved as children is we need to be allowed. So allowed to feel what you feel, express what you need to express, say what you need to say, be interested in what you're interested in, all those things. And what you're talking about, so when I say you need to say what you need to say and how you need to say it, right? So that's how, whether you need to speak it out or write it out. But there are ways in which, but it's also like you feel you need to say something and you also feel you need to do something. Like, and so for some people, there might, sometimes I feel like I need to hit somebody or I need to scream. Now, again, I might not need to scream to you because this may not be something that this may cause more issues than what I'm really wanting here. But I do need to honor the fact that I want to hit something and I want to scream. So one of the things I do, and this is something with my private clients I do all the time, but this is something I do. Again, I teach what I do. So something that I do when I'm really mad, and you have seen this as you're my friends, sometimes I will call you and be like, listen, I just need to vent for 5 minutes. And I
Yep.
will get it out and I'll yell, I'll say whatever that is, and it's done. And then if there are times when I need to hit, if I feel like I need to hit somebody, I'm that like I'm this anger. I've worked with many people who have been like have such suppressed anger. And one of the most healing exercises I do, and they are so resistant to this in the beginning, is I'll take them somewhere in a field or somewhere like that, and I'll buy a whole bunch of plates from the dollar store. And I'll say, scream out what you need to say and break these plates. And they're like, no, right? Or they're like, I'm just really, they'll hold it. As a matter of fact, they have a plate. I'm not going to break this plate because this is my bowl. But like they'll hold it like this and they'll be like, it just didn't make me feel good. I'm like, nope, that's not what you feel. Say what you feel and break that plate. And they'll eventually get to this point where they'll be like, you didn't fucking see me. And they'll slam the plate on the thing and they'll break it. And I'll be great. And I'll hand them another plate and they'll slam the plate. And eventually you think you're going to be out of control, but eventually there comes this point where it's out. And then your breathing goes back to normal. And you're like, oh my God. And then you get the wisdom and you're like, I can see this other piece now. And that's the part, like, you need the wholeness. Like, if there's something that you feel, if it's in the body and it feels like it needs to come out of your body, you'll feel like punching something, you'll feel like screaming, go do it. Like, I will, if I'm in a house with somebody, and this was one a healer taught me this many, many years ago. Like, they were like, if you're somewhere with somebody, right? Go in the bathroom, take a pillow, turn the lights out, put it over your face, and scream and tap like, "Ah," and get it out, right? And that is because it's emotions are, they're not just in the consciousness, they are also in the energy, they're in the body. So you have to get them out of the consciousness and you have to get them out of your energy. And you need tools for both. And that's, again, now sometimes, again, it's not in the body, depending on if you catch it in the beginning, it may not have centered in the body that much. But a lot of times, if you know you have some anger that's been built up, it's in the body. And so you got to do things too to release that from the body. And breaking plates, punching a pillow, screaming, those things are, and again, socially we're taught these things aren't acceptable, but we are really, again, we're not taught the things that really help us heal and be whole and well as souls. And that's really, you're supposed to express and get things out of the body. Like, look at our pets. Our pets are our master teachers. When
I
your
was
pet is
just about to say
angry,
it.
it's going to growl. If that growl doesn't get honored, it's going to bark. And if its last resort, it's going to scratch and attack. But it has ways to get the anger out of its body. And when it's as you watch a pet and like something happens that makes it angry outside, it will go through that. It will release all that, and then it's done. It is done. That dog is not angry about that thing 2 weeks later, because it has said what it needed to say. It has barked, it has stomped and ran, and then it's done. And we need that same type of, we are animals. We forget about, we're not, our education system really has not done a good enough job to remind us of this, that we are animals. And just like all of the animal kingdom and how the other animal kingdom works, we need to express physically and audibly.
When you when you think about the biggest challenge, either for yourself in the reparenting process, or when you think about it for um, the Black same gender loving community or the Black community as a whole, what do you think is the biggest challenge to people beginning the work?
So, I'm going to say the one that's in my head right now. It might, if as I think about it later, it might not be the biggest one, but it's huge. It's still huge all by itself. It probably is, but it's huge. I'll say one of the biggest challenges to doing the work of reparenting yourself, and actually, I'll just say doing the work of truly loving yourself and actually living a love-nourished life, is a lot of the things that you need to do to effectively receive the love that you need, to be well nourished with love, maybe things that you were taught were socially unacceptable, or they may be things that you were taught that were religiously unacceptable, or they may be things that went against, what you thought was morally correct. So a lot of things like, the way we've demonized, by the way, in the West especially, we've demonized receiving, the actual process of receiving. We have made giving the thing that is the holy grail and the thing that is to be championed and that's worthy of the gold medal. But we have really diminished and demonized receiving, and we need both. And receiving is really, what we've said is giving is what makes you, a worthy being and a good person in the world. But if you're not receiving, it's kind of like what I like to say is it's just like breathing. If all you were doing was exhaling, you're going to die. You
Yeah.
need to inhale. You need to receive oxygen in your system. And so there are going to be things you need to do to receive love in a healthy and consistent and frequent manner that may go against what you were taught was culturally acceptable and socially acceptable. Um, and that is where people come into being challenged. This is what we talked about this, I think, in a conversation where I learned that, one of the ways I was starved of love, that I did not receive love a lot, was attention. And by the way, like, we need to receive love in different areas. So there's four main areas that you need to receive love in. There's different areas by which you need to receive love, like different facets of love you need to receive, but you need to receive them in these four areas. One is your intellect, one is your personality, the other one is your body, and then your talents and skills. So I received a lot of attention in my intellect when growing up. I was called very smart. I scored high, I was in the 1% of the test, and everybody was praising. I received a lot of praise and celebration and affirmation around my intellect. That was how that looks now is I have a very strong sense of my intellect. Right? I don't feel like I need extra degrees in order to stand in the room with people. I could literally stand in the room with a Nobel Peace Prize winning scientist, dignitary, the president of the United States, some of the smartest people, and I will feel like I deserve to be there. I will feel like I have something to offer them. I feel like I can talk with them. I feel like I may not feel like I can challenge their expertise level, but I don't feel like I don't belong there and that I'm less than, right? And that's because I received love consistently and frequently in the area of my intellect. So I have a strong sense of self in that area, and I am very resilient around that, right? Where I didn't receive it was in my body, right? And so, and probably for several reasons, right? I think our culture in the West does not really, and probably other cultures outside the West, but this is very heavily dominant in the West, where we don't believe that boys need affection and attention around their looks. We just think that's what girls need. So I didn't receive that. Like, people weren't talking about how handsome I was or how attractive I was or anything like that. And to add to that, I was teased a lot by my peers because I was thick when I was a kid. I was thicker. I wasn't thin. And so I was called chubby and things like that. And so I was made to feel like I was not fed love when it comes to my body and my looks. So how that looked growing up is I did not have a strong sense of feeling attractive and feeling wanted and feeling desirable. I did not have a strong sense. And when I say strong sense, I had a very toxic sense of it. I had a wounded sense of it. So I did not feel enough. I felt my body wasn't enough to be loved. I felt, and I would, but we need that. You need the attention and affirmation. These are ways you need to receive love. So what I did to receive it was I had a sex addiction, because having sex with people was the way that I was the only time I felt someone appreciated my body. And the way that I felt that if somebody wanted to have sex with me, that meant my body was enough and it was appreciated. But it was just sex to them. So they were gone. And so now I'm still feeling, so this was the way, like, reparenting myself around that meant looking at how do I shower my body, my thoughts about myself and my views around my body with love, and how do I give it positive attention, and how do I accept and affirm it, not just from me, but how do I receive it in my environment as well. And so that was like, these are kind of the ways in which it shows up. I forgot what your initial question was. I went all the way into that, but this is way
This is perfect because it was going into where I wanted to go anyway with this conversation.
okay.
Uh, because it's all around, like, releasing the negative impact of not being wanted. And so I know you and I have had a number of conversations around that, but I think this is particularly important, for Black same gender loving men. It could be important for Black women around so much of my messaging growing up around my body was that I'm disgusting, I'm nasty. So those were always
Mm.
the messages, and you're hearing that from people, and then you also don't see people who look like you around you, and then you're queer too, and so there is no messaging that counteract or that contradicted this message of like you're just this nasty human being. And
Yeah.
so to to have to learn how to reparent myself around that, I'm like, what is this? And like you said, you get on apps, or you try and getting this external validation, and then you get messages of like, oh, I'm not really into Black guys. And you're like, it's like, holy shit, well, how am I gonna get through this life? And I think it's the same experience for many Black same gender loving men particularly in the gay community, where they don't have this feeling of appreciation. One, because they've never received it, but two, because the collective consciousness isn't around that, particularly here. Maybe if you go to other countries, the Caribbean or to Africa, it's very different, but that has its own stuff. But to be able to have to relearn, or to have to learn how to parent myself around like my body and my desirability, that that's a whole nother thing. The intellect feels easier than trying to love on this.
Yeah. Okay. So, so much. Okay. So I want to speak to two things here. One is what happens when you're growing up as a same gender loving Black child, male child. And two, so let me start with this. So when you're the way you are loved growing up shapes your belief system about yourself. And this is why this is really important to understand, because your belief system then manifests the rest of your life. As souls, your belief system is literally the thing that is creating your reality. So when you have not received love for your body, like we did not, and you're made to feel, because what's happening is you're receiving messages, external messages, maybe not from your family system. Like my parents never said anything negative about my body. They never shamed me about my looks. They just weren't affirmative of them, right? They weren't praising them. But the society I was in was very negatively, giving me negative response to my body. So I was made to believe my body was unwanted and that it was undesirable. And there was no message countering that, right? Um, and so that was my belief system. Well, here's what ends up happening. When you believe that, you can only manifest experiences that will continue to affirm that. So my relationships began to affirm that. People, again, because you talked about the app. So my experiences with the apps would be, people telling me, oh, you'd be really attractive if you were smaller, or you'd be this and you'd be this. And all of that changed when my belief about my body changed, right? When all of that changed, my entire experience around my body has changed, because not because I worked out. I mean, I had that same experience when I was 300 pounds. I had it when I was 170 pounds. I had it when I was had a six pack. When I didn't, I was still being rejected. I was still not enough. I was still undesirable. But when I changed my viewpoint around my body and I began to love my body, and I began to reparent myself by learning how to appreciate, affirm, and see my body in a very positive and celebratory light, that's when everything shifted, like overnight, right? But here's the thing about growing up, so that's one, like the importance of understanding this is not just something your entire life is dependent upon how well you're going to reparent yourself. The well-being of your life is dependent upon it. And about giving yourself the love, not just like physically giving it, but giving it in your consciousness, giving it in your belief system. And as a Black same gender queer, queer child growing up, queer or same gender loving or whatever, as a Black male growing up, we didn't like, that wasn't something that a lot of parents. Now there are some people that are outliers who did receive this, whose parents did give them that love, so they don't need strength in this area. But the dominant experience of Black same gender loving men was that as a child, your parents were not very affirmative of how you looked. And because you weren't straight, unless you played straight. Now, if you were straight, if you were playing straight, you might have received affirmation from your environment, because the girls may have thought you were really cute. They may have wanted you. People may have talked about how attractive you were. But if you didn't fit into the social norms, like if you weren't the athlete or whatever, if you were thicker like I was, then you got teased. And so you weren't getting affirmation there weren't other people coming to you. And we didn't grow up in an environment where it was kind of a safe thing to do to date who you wanted to date. And this is another way we receive affirmation and appreciation and attention for our bodies, is when we're dating people that we want to date, right? So if I was straight, I would date a woman, and she would tell me how sexy she feels I am, and I would see her eyes light up when she comes around me, and I want that type of attention from her. So that's nourishing to me. But as a same gender loving man, I want to date that boy over there, but he's not. I can't do that because I'm fearing for my safety of my life growing up in the Midwest, particularly, and so I don't get an affirmation from him with his eyes lighting up. When I see me, I'm not in school hearing all the boys talk about, oh, Jerome he's really cute, or oh, that looks really nice on him. And so there's no place where you're receiving that type of love, right? You're not getting it in the family system. You're not getting it in your peer system in school, because that was not socially acceptable back then. It's still today, but it wasn't socially acceptable. So you grow up as an adult that is highly starved of love in this area. You are highly starved, and you are going to manifest not just experiences and relationships that are going to further starve you, but being starved of love is not benign. Remember, it's a need. So then you start to manifest illnesses and diseases that are reflections of you being starved in this area, but we're not taught about that, right? But that's not benign. Your body needs to receive that type of love for it to be healthy. And if it continues to be starved, which a lot of Black same gender loving men are starved in that way, then you're going to have negative experience of health. You're not going to have good health in the body. It's going to be negative health. And a way to heal that is to learn to receive that. But that's something we're not talking about in a mass level, is about how we have this epidemic of Black same gender loving men out in the world who do not love their bodies and do not feel love towards their bodies because they were not shown love towards their bodies when they were kids.
There was something I think we talked about last summer, where now when we see kids in their teens who are same gender loving, and they're like holding hands and being really affectionate in public, you're like, oh yes. And then there's another part of you that's like, oh shit. Because I think what we talked about in that conversation is, how much different would our life be had we been able to openly express our affection for the person we liked, and been able to just show what that looks like, and for it to be okay. And it's like, I feel like I missed out on so much of like what it means to be um a teenager in love, or kind of like what that whole experience is like, because I never got a chance to do it. And so it's like, oh, learning how to show affection to my partner has been a process for me because I never did it. I never did it growing up. It was just like, oh no, that's not safe. So why would I start? Even though you're like in this relationship where affection can be. And it's like it's mind blowing to see
Yeah.
some of the things that still feel edgy for me
Hmm.
because it's this deep ingrained conditioning of like this is not safe, this is not safe, this is not safe. And to consciously say, all right, I am going to do something different and to be with it and then to express it with the potential of like, okay, what's going to be on the receiving end of me expressing this thing is this whole new experience. Like last summer, this is for the group. Last summer, I went to not Oklahoma, to Kansas City for my cousin's 50th birthday, and um, one of his fraternity brothers made some derogatory comments about the gay community and whatnot, and so I I was talking to my cousin about it, and he said, "Do you want me to say something to him?" And at that time, it was his 50th birthday. We were there for his birthday. But when they were talking about it, it was in the midst of probably 60 plus people. So I'm like, I'm not trying to make a scene at your birthday right now. So if you want to say something, you can. Um, and he said, no, I'm asking you, do you want me to say something? So he talked to his frat brother, and then that night I got to the party and his frat brother and one of our friends called me over. And so the brother apologized to me. And it was this really beautiful, sincere apology. And I appreciated it. But it was that moment of like, oh, I'm advocating and speaking up for myself. Whereas before I would have been like, oh, this doesn't feel safe to me. I don't want to do that. And even just learning how to do little things like that feels like this huge process. When if you're a straight person, you're like, hey, that didn't work for me. And you just go and you say it. But then there's kind of this whole coming out process, and then there's the rejection process, and then there's the okay, now that I said something, is he gonna try and fight me as I step outside? And it's this whole kind of mental gymnastics that you're having to walk through to like figure out what are the ladder of consequences by me taking this action to just be me.
Yeah, you again, you said so a thousand things. It's so good. Um, so I wanna circle back because I'm gonna try to touch on all this because you ate it. So you were asking like what is it like you were talking about the phenomena of us seeing the younger generation receiving love in the ways that we didn't and being able to be loved in the way that we weren't, and us having both a celebration but also a repulsion, right? And I want to speak to that because one of the things that happens is like when you weren't loved in a different in a way, when that wasn't okay, when you weren't allowed, when you didn't receive love for something, whether it was for your personality or your intellect or your expression or something, you were taught what that says is this is not okay about me. Because what happens in the subconscious is it goes, this part of me is not okay because this part of me will not be loved. And remember, this is what you want more than anything. So this is this part of me won't be loved. So this is not okay. So you really can't take seeing somebody else be in that, because what you are saying to yourself is this is not okay for me. So then you project it really can't be okay for you either, right? So although we want it, but so your consciousness wants it, but your subconscious mind is saying this is dangerous, this is not okay. right? And I see this a lot with older same gender loving men who talk about, like Black, especially Black, talk about wanting to be free and wanting to express themselves and wanting to be in the world and going to workshops and everything for that. But then they see a younger person that is that now, and they can't take it some type of way. And this is where it's coming from. The other part that you said, I think, because the reframe of it is what will hit you in your chest, because this is what hits me in my chest, and this is what I do with some of my clients, and it hits them. So you talked about, like, what would it be like if I was allowed to express myself like that in my childhood? What would it have been like if I was allowed to do this? So the question that you're asking really is, who would I have been if I was truly loved? Who would I be if I was truly and wholly loved? That's what we're really asking. And that's the powerful question, right? Because one, it's going to hurt a bit because you're going to see, oh shit, right? But then you're going to say, wow, this is the work of reparenting myself, because I can be. Who would I be if I was fully loved? I can still be that. I can still be that. And I can do it now. I needed, and when I was a kid, I needed somebody else to help me, but I can do this now, right? And then the other part of this is, we're not given, I think as a Black same gender loving person, this is my personal opinion, I think when the soul chooses this journey, you are choosing, it's beyond a master class. It's beyond, because you have no models, you have no rule books. There was, for those that are coming now, they have examples, but we didn't have public examples. There were not a lot of public people that were, so this life was very much about learning on your own. So you were talking about, like, how do I, like, receiving affection? I didn't receive affection. I didn't do all of that. And this is the beauty of it. It's like, I'm learning, and this is kind of like giving ourselves permission to give ourselves a break. Like, same gender loving, if you're Black and a same gender loving man, give yourself a fucking break, because you did not, the fact that you're even here, you deserve a whole parade just for you by yourself, because who taught you? Right? Where did you learn how to love another man for real? Where did you learn how to be loved by another man? Where did you learn how to express the fullness of yourself and understand that life loves you and is safe? Right? You had to learn that. And a lot of times you don't start learning that until some type of chaos shows in your life, and you have to learn that to survive. But like that, we're not taught, they don't teach us this in schools. We don't get taught in school as a same gender loving person how to live a good life. I mean, rarely do heterosexuals, they don't get taught how to have good life and relationships either, but at least they have processes through the school system, like dating and Valentine's Day and all that type of stuff, where you get to express and experience some type of thing. We didn't get that. And so your ability to learn how to be a whole human being, you are learning on the fly. And that is it is a challenge. It has sadness to it, but it has a lot of glory. Like, my God, look at you. Like, nobody was there. And here you are. And what can happen when you do get the help, right? This is the other thing about reparenting I want to say, kind of with this, is like, reparenting it's a deep process. So I just kind of laid like a mustard seed of what it actually is. But one thing that I really want to say is like, so you will get help with it. Like a therapist, a healer like myself, somebody who is trained in being able to do this. so that you don't, so that points like what you're talking about is like, I'm in this relationship and I don't know how to speak for what I need. And that's because you weren't allowed to speak up for what you were needed as a kid in some type of way. And you weren't, because when you're loved, you learn what that takes, you learn what that looks like, what it feels. And the big thing that you learn is that this aspect of me is lovable and is safe. So it's worthy to be expressed and it's safe in the world. When you're not, you start to feel like it's not worthy. You have a belief that whatever this is I'm not worthy with this, and it's not safe. And you will do anything you can to protect yourself from whatever danger you believe is not safe and the loss of love that you believe will come from your unworthiness. And until you really change those belief systems around, those patterns of behavior will happen. And that's what shows up in our relationships. It's like, I remember going on this date last year. This is last year. And I went on this date to the movies, and this guy wanted to hold my hand in the movie theater and while we were walking out. And I have never done public affection of any kind when I have dated a man. Never. Because where I was, that was being in the Midwest and then going to college in the South. That was like, you was in danger. Like that Whoopi Goldberg quote, you in danger, girl. You in danger, girl. And all I kept hearing in my head as he was holding my hand, I was like, I am in danger, girl. I am in danger. And it was this big thing about, like, I had to literally breathe and do some work with myself in the midst of this. Is like, I'm safe. Life loves me. This is going to be okay. And it was this beautiful experience. But that was my first time doing that in public, because I didn't get a chance to do that as a kid. Right? My heterosexual friends don't understand that, because everywhere they were loved by life and society itself around that when they were kids. So that was okay. They were allowed to do that. It was seen as okay. It was seen as welcomed. You could hold your girlfriend or boyfriend's hand in elementary school, right? But two boys holding hands, y'all about to be called all the F words. You might have to fight somebody. If your parents find out, you probably gonna get a whooping later. So that wasn't so in my head, that is associated with threat. And so reparenting myself around that is allowing myself to express love how I want to express love for the person I love or the person I'm with or I'm interested in. And that's kind of like, this is deep work. It doesn't just, and it's like we said in the beginning, it's an ongoing practice, because there will be something else that may come up later, and are deeper ways in which you can go into allowing yourself to receive love in all areas of your life.
So there are two more things that I want to bring up before we wrap this up. The first one is I love Queer Eye. I know I'm gonna give me a good cry when I watch Queer Eye, and they're gonna get me together in some type of way. So when I think it was like 2 episodes ago, I remember Karamo was talking to a trans woman, and she was figuring out how to have this new relationship with her dad. And this reframe it solidified so much for me, because he was saying, so much of the conversation for the LGBT community is like this idea of coming out. But with coming out, you're giving your power over to the other person. And he encouraged her to think about it as you're inviting them in. And it was like, oh, yes. It's like, I'm inviting you into my world. Do you want to be a part of my world, or do you not want to be a part of my world? I would like for you to be a part of my world, but if you choose not to, then I can grieve that, be in my feelings about it, and I can move on and you can move on. But there was this beautiful moment of feeling like I got some of my power back and just listening to him talk about it. because it's like, oh, I never have to come out again, but I can always invite people in.
Mm, 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 mm. Recentering yourself in your
Yeah,
own life, right?
yeah,
Yes, like I'm not just worthy because that's what my life is, but I'm recentering my awareness that I am the center of my life. And everyone, and I can be the center in whatever experience I'm in.
the last piece is really, this was the inspiration for this conversation when we talked a few days ago. And you said something to me around projecting the pieces of ourselves that we know can get loved and hiding the pieces that we think will be rejected.
Mm,
And I think that's a really important part to point to end on. And I want to hear your thoughts around it, because when I think about releasing the impact of not being wanted, that means I also have to reclaim those parts that
mhm.
I have believed haven't been lovable.
Yeah. Ah. So you did it again. 'Cause you know, you stealing my thunder because this was going to be my next podcast episode.
I'm just setting you
Um,
up.
so, God, it just hits me in my heart just thinking about it. Um, so what we do when we have not been wholly loved, right? And this, by the way, all of us have some experience of not being wholly loved, no matter who you are, no matter what your sexuality, race, color, gender, all of that. Um, but what happens is you're made to believe that there are parts of you that are loved and that there are parts that are not. There are parts of you, let me say it like this. You're made to believe there are parts of you that are lovable and parts of you that are not. So there are parts that will receive love and that can receive love, and parts that will not receive love and cannot. And when you begin to have this belief, what you begin to do is you project into the world the pieces of you that you believe will be loved and that can be loved, and you suppress the pieces that you think cannot. And you only present these pieces to people. And what that ends up doing is you never present your whole authentic self. You're always some version, some edited, carefully constructed version of you to protect yourself from loss of love. That's why you do it. You don't want to lose love. You don't want to lose belonging. So you're trying to protect yourself by hiding and suppressing the pieces that you believe aren't lovable and only presenting these pieces that are. There's a few things wrong that are wrong with that. Number one, you're never your authentic self. So you never are ever unconditionally loved, which is why you're here. You're here to receive unconditional love, and you won't ever know what that is until you fully allow your full self to be expressed. That's number one. Number two, people will start to feel betrayed by you because you have to bring these pieces out some type of way, right? And when you get in relationship with people, these pieces come out in some type of way. And so people, you begin to reject, you receive reject, and again, you're manifesting experiences where you're going to be rejected again. And you further, instead of understanding you're being rejected because you're not being your full self, you feel like this piece further needs to be hidden even more, and you just keep the toxicity going. And the thing that actually happens is so funny you brought this up, because I was literally writing a post about this today, and was gonna post this, because there comes something in your healing journey. It's a magic point, and this magic point comes when you realize that the ways that you have been trying to protect yourself from losing love have actually been doing the opposite. They have been starving you of love. They have been keeping you from receiving it. And that's when your true healing starts, because that's when you start to learn how to stop projecting and just be the fullness of yourself. And this is the scary part, because again, your mind has told you just that these parts of you won't be loved. For example, let me give you an example. I was teased. I was a very effeminate kid. I had a very high voice. I was more feminine in my movements and my expressions, and I was teased a lot because of that. I was often mistaken for a girl. I was teased a lot for that. And I was made to believe that the feminine aspects of me did not belong and they were not going to be loved and that they were going to be rejected. And so I began to, and then when I grew into, so I began to try to be more masculine, suppress the feminine aspects and try to be more masculine. And then how my consciousness further manifested this in my reality is when I became a teenager and started being interested in men. It was about being masked for mask, no femmes, no fats, no femmes, right? That was really big.
Oh,
And so I would always present this masculine persona of me, and I would always suppress the feminine parts of me, even though like I used to be very, when I found Vogue in the 1990s and I went to the clubs in Atlanta and them kids was voguing, I thought that was the most beautiful thing I had. Honestly, I thought that was the most creative and beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. I thought it was so beautiful and I wanted to do it, but I never would let myself do it publicly because that was too feminine, right? And so what ends up happening is you split yourself. There's a whole thing I can speak about, but you split yourself. You're never whole because there's a piece of you, a part of you that is suppressed, that you're denying, that you're rejecting. And in order to be whole, and in order to receive the fullness of love that the universe wants to pour on you, you have to get that piece. You have to stop projecting. You have to get the piece that you think is not like lovable, and you have to present it as well. You have to present all of yourself. And this is scary in the beginning because your mind says you're going to die. You're going to lose everything. But the real healing comes when you say, I am willing to lose everything if it means I get to be all of myself. And you bring that, and what you find, because here's the truth, the universe loves you fully, unconditionally, but you don't ever see it until you allow your full self to be seen. And when you allow your full self to be seen and you're not projecting and you're not editing anymore, that's when you experience heaven on earth, because you get showered with love, and all the parts that you thought were too ugly or too femme or too unwanted. It's like, I used to say that it's like, that's when the universe like puts you at like a ring on its finger and it goes around showing everybody how beautiful you are. But you don't ever experience that. We don't experience that as long as these pieces are here. You only get loved for the pieces you're projecting, and you'll never feel free. You'll never feel, you really feel in bondage because that piece keeps trying to come out and you keep like, oh my God, no, 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 no. It's highly stressful. It takes a lot of energy from you. It will manifest illness in you and all those things. But the big piece is it starves you of love. Although you think you think what you're doing is allowing yourself to be fed love, you actually get starved love that way. And that's all I'm gonna give you in this piece.
this conversation has been rich.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What are there any last thoughts that you want to share before we wrap up?
I think we gave the kids, I think they have a whole meal in here. They have enough to eat, baby. We gonna be in this kitchen cooking. We gonna serve some other things. We got some other plates to come out. We're gonna be cooking for these kids, but I think we gave them, this meal is enough. I think they have enough to chew on and digest. And I feel complete. I feel complete with what we've said.
Well, as always, I'm really, really excited that we got to come back on and have a conversation. And I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Me too. As always, I love you and thanks.
I love you too. Bye.